Hey, everybody, welcome to Sane-ish. This is our first episode, and I'm so excited. I have my first guest today, and I'm so grateful because I asked her, and she was like, "Yes," and she was so supportive and so excited with me. And we are actually doing her in a three-part series. Jaibez Regalado was my RSPS instructor, and her story was very impressive to me because she has come a long way, and she and I have a lot of similarities. There's a lot of parallels with her and I, so I felt a very strong connection with her. But when I asked her, there was like no hesitation, and I'm very grateful for that. And she was very supportive, and that's what I love in the not only the peer support community, but in the recovery community, because that's what it's all about. It's all about support and people meeting you where you are. So anyway, I want to welcome Jaibez, and she's gonna this first episode, she's going to share her story from inception to where she's at now. And we're kind of just going to free flow because we're going to just have a conversation. She's going to tell her story, and then we'll see where it goes. But it's very impressive. So welcome, Jaibez. Welcome to Sane-ish.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I am so proud of you, Haley. So proud to be on Sane-ish because, like I was telling you, I have a lot of that ish. So yes, thank you everybody for showing up. Again, my name is Jaibez Regalado. So I appreciate it, and I'm honored to be here and to be your first guest to walk this path with you.
That's awesome. It is just impressive to me that you didn't even say for what. You just like, or yes, I'm so proud of you. I'll do it. So so tell us like how you got here. Like, start from the beginning. Like, where did you grow up? Like, how were you when you were a little kid? Like, who was your family? Like, all of that stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
oh,
Yeah. So a little bit about me. I am from Dallas, Texas. I'm from the Oak Cliff, you know. So yes, I'm from a hood near you. Yeah, I am the middle child. I have an older brother and I have a younger sister that is 10 years younger than me. I grew up in a very domestic violence household, a lot of trauma, a lot of side effects that I deal with now from that, and I'm in my healing journey. But my dad was in and out of prison. He was sentenced for murder a couple of times, and he's been there, done that. My mother, was a young mom. She had my brother very young. Me and my brother are 3 years apart. So she was raised by herself as well. So my mom was doing everything that she could, I believe, in those circumstances. Things have definitely changed now in today's society from back then. But all that to say, yes, my dad was in and out of prison. Mother was just doing the best that she could. Grew up in a very toxic household. I've seen a lot of abuse. I've seen a lot of physical, emotional, psychological trauma. I learned early on that I was my mom's protector. I seen a lot. I heard my mom be raped a lot by my dad, be cussed out. I've seen Christmas trees be thrown across the house. I mean, there was always something going on. My dad was out of prison. They met, I think, at their job or whatnot. My dad got back into drugs, into the lifestyle, and yeah, so it was a lot. Fast forward a little bit, I believe they separated when I was in second grade. Like I said, they were off and on because my dad wasn't able to set my mom free. My dad was very controlling and abusive. My mom, like I said, I think there was a huge trauma bond going on now that I think about it. But how did I grow up? A little bit about me as a little girl. I feel like I'd never had a childhood. I wasn't raised to have a childhood. I feel like I was always that emotional um, isolator, kind of by myself. When I think back, I was a little bit of a bully. I The way we expressed our love was through physical violence, aggression. um, I remember early on always beating up my cousins, beating up the boys. I think I became a little bully. It was very promoted, so it was like, oh, go beat them up, go attack, and I remember just having a lot of aggression as a child, as a little girl. And then I started fighting a lot in school, always having problems. So when I think about it now, when I process in therapy, I really think about how I was robbed from that childhood. I never had a nurturing family. The culture was, a whole different thing. Culture plays a part. And I really didn't have that affection too much. My dad was affectionate, I believe, like in the moments I was daddy's little girl. In those moments, nobody could mess with his little girl. I'm his only birth child. He did adopt my brother. He was very abusive to my brother as well. So I did see a lot of that. And I did have this guilt because I felt like there was favoritism. My brother, I feel like, grew up not liking me because of my dad really, I was like his little sidekick, but being his little sidekick, I was seeing a lot of things going on. I witnessed my dad cheating on my mom multiple times, witnessed my dad, drugging and thugging, doing his thing. Um, I was constantly in the mix, grown folks business, exposed to a lot, seeing a lot. I had beer from early on, beer in my bottle. We didn't have really juice. We didn't have juices. We had beer. So that was something that I grew up with, is drinking alcohol, and being around the cannabis, smelling it, hot boxing when my dad would just smoke. I was constantly, I think I was probably under the influence a lot, during before second grade. So I can remember early on, like I said, I just remember feeling so much grief and so much emotion and so much sympathy and empathy for my mom. Of course, I couldn't articulate that, but just quiet, just kind of seeing the abuse take place. I didn't really have any protectors. And then when my dad will go to prison, I felt alone because, again, I was that daddy's little girl here and there. And my mom wasn't that nurturing mom. I think she was just trying to survive. My dad was, he would try to kill her and children and all that if she tried to leave. I remember the day that she did leave. She was scared, and I remember my mom saying, "I would rather me and my kids die than live with this." So all that to say, how I grew up was very dysfunctional. Very, I didn't grow up knowing anger. I grew up knowing rage. I didn't know that till I was a teenager, that I had a lot of rage in me. So I was operating in a lot of impulsive behaviors, fighting, cussing out teachers, seeking attention. I would go to school. I remember being in elementary, being a troubled child, fighting all the time and cussing out my teachers and just kind of not being able to understand school. And now that I think about it, it's because like I was surviving home. My wife asks me a lot, like she was like, "You don't remember this movie? You don't remember this? We learned this in elementary. We learned this." I'm like, "No, I was busy surviving. I didn't have a childhood. I Even if they were playing the movie, I wasn't there. Like I recognized that I was disassociating a lot." So it was very traumatic, Holly. and I think I suffer a lot with the side effects today, and I'm also learning to heal those inner wounds. So in a
Well,
nutshell,
it's kind of hard, like when you grow up. I mean, you were talking about being a bully, but I mean, you were kind of in a bully environment. Like,
that's
I mean,
good.
how else were you supposed to? Not that it was okay, but I mean, how are you? Like, what else? How else were you supposed? What else did you learn? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so
Oh, absolutely. Grew up in a bullying household. Yeah. So now I'm having to learn a lot of those behaviors because I still got it.
yeah. And if people don't know, and this is funny, Jay, because this is another parallel. I was born at Memorial Hospital in the Cliffs, so so
Nice.
so I know Oak Cliff. I'm very familiar, and my grandmother used to live in Oak Cliff, so so I'm very familiar with the Cliffs. The Cliffs is well, it used to be very rough down down there. I think
Yes.
they're kind of, I think they're doing some gentrification there, but I don't know.
They're trying to clean it up, big time. Looks totally different, but yes, it
Yeah,
was rough.
yeah, it was very rough back in the day, but yeah. So we were like at elementary school going into like junior high and uh, all
Uh,
that stuff, and
I not I always remember this. I have challenges with stability. And when I say stability is like moving around, like I've moved around a lot, even as an adult woman. I went to like probably almost like 10 elementary schools. Um, I I was all over from Mesquite to North Dallas, South Dallas to, Arlington, Grand Prairie. I mean, I moved around a lot. So my mom finally said gets herself free from my dad. Of course, my dad didn't let go too easy. So I was always seeing my mom had a boyfriend here and there. And my mom continued the same cycle. She would meet men, just the same man in a different body. Of course, that I want to say that battered woman syndrome happened a lot with my mother. She continued to date the same men. I remember she had one guy that she was with. I actually liked him. He was decent, but my dad, I think, scared him away. My dad will pass by, and like I said, my dad's a murderer. He didn't care. Nothing's off limits. Threatened the guy, and I remember just seeing, my dad trying to run him over, and there was a lot that I've seen, I was exposed to. Then fast forward a little bit, my mom meets this, I don't like to call him my stepdad, well, my sister's dad. Oh, that was another abusive situation. So my whole upbringing was abusive. So I think she met him when I was probably in fourth grade, no, third grade, maybe even second. So that cycle continued. And so, of course, he was all nice and everything, but literally it was like replaying the same incidents of my dad. He was very abusive. I would hear him rape my mother. He was on substances. He would come home late. A lot of trauma was taking place. He was very abusive to my brother. He started grooming me. And there was just a lot of abuse that took place. So I was literally reliving the same thing as a child. He molested me. There's a lot of denial on that. So from him and that side, but yes, he did. And he did it on Memorial Day. So every time Memorial Day comes along, it's Memorial Day, right?
yeah,
So yeah, he did it right there. He used to lock us up in the rooms. And it was very, very abusive, a lot that took place. And so yeah, so we, I'm going through that, having a lot more trouble in school, cussing out the teachers, fighting in school, always having problems. But I would never leave my mother's side. Like I was her care, like I cared for her so much. Like I would make sure, like I would take the abuse. I was always the one that jumped in and said, leave my mom alone. Like I was taking on a lot of stuff. And when I think about it, like my wife tries to educate me with school. We're having a history class the other day and watching this history stuff. And she's like, you didn't know this? Like we taught this in school. Like they were taught this. I was like, no, like I wasn't there. Like I didn't have that childhood. We didn't, you know, we didn't have these clothes. We didn't have these shoes. I didn't have that liberty. I didn't
Mhm.
have somebody that checked in on me. Like I was forced out of the house because I wouldn't leave my mother's sight. Like I always wanted to make sure that she was okay. And, so that's all through elementary, middle school, high school, being kicked out of the house. He would kick us out. He would leave us in the middle of the highway. He would, um,
Well, it just goes to show how being trauma bond, like your mom being trauma bonded to those men affects and affected you. Like it's a ripple effect. You know what I mean? Like it is like a family thing. I mean, and then everybody has to heal from all that, you know?
yeah.
So,
And honestly, like I always knew, so I always knew there was something like within me that I knew that wasn't right. Like I said, I feel like I was always just present, and in my spirit, I just knew like I could not be like that. I always had a softness. I never wanted to be. My brother started getting in a lot of trouble. I never wanted to continue the cycle of my mom stressing about me. So I did a lot of things in secret. I was really good at getting away with a lot of things. And never making sure my mom never really found out.
mhm.
So I was kind of like under the radar a lot, but I was always conscious and I always had a conscience. And I was like, damn, what am I doing? Like, my mom's already stressed about my brother and she's going through all this. And I mean, it was just a lot of bullshit. But I knew, and I was finding my way. So when I got into middle school, I was finding my way. I got into ROTC, and I loved ROTC because I was a kid and I was thinking to myself, man, I want discipline. I want to learn how to have discipline. And like I was self-teaching a lot of myself. I was trying to find my way, constantly getting in trouble. And I threw myself in ROTC. I excelled so good. Like, and I was still having a lot of trouble there, but the commander saw something in me and they were like, oh, we want to sponsor you into this. I was in a lot of parades, but I was already into drugs in elementary. I was into drugs in middle school. Again, I was very under the radar. Um and yeah, I threw myself in that, excelled. And then I got into high school, threw myself in that. Like I said, I mean, and then what happened was, I think I was already spiraling, but when they started changing, the school system started changing over that you had to make good grades to be in extracurricular activities. That messed me up because remember, I didn't have those academic, talents or whatever, those skills. And I started copying my way through school, and then I got into softball. Like I said, I was trying all kinds of things, but still in this trouble. And I just knew I was destined for more. But when the school system did that, I feel like, man, like that's when I really started to spiral. So I couldn't finish ROTC. They kicked me out of that. I couldn't finish softball. They kicked me out of that because of the grades. And that's when I really, really just want to and I just kind of started wilding out really, really bad. I was going to go to the Marines. I feel like I had a go, but they said I wasn't smart enough to pass the ASVAB and I couldn't pass it. Like it was a bunch of shit. And still underneath all that, my mom kept going back and forth to my sister's dad um and then she kicked me out and then I was living in different dope houses and it was just a cycle of just
Did you did
cycling.
you ever did you ever get did you ever suffer any consequences? Like, did you ever get like arrested, thrown in jail, and all that kind of stuff? Or
So when she kicked me out, so I was 16 and I met my first girlfriend ever. And we started doing hardcore drugs together. long story short, that was a whole nother spiral and another story in itself, because that again heightened everything that I was doing. And I was already kicked out, and I was living in shacks and dope houses and all that. And then that's when I went. Music is my therapy. Music is so therapeutic for me. So I ended up going to jail when I literally just turned 17. I went to big kid jail, well, big girl jail. And because I was still in CDs at Target, I knew I was going to get caught. And that's when I just really stopped caring. I was just like, whatever. I was intentionally just kind of like, and then I went to jail, cried because I was getting out. Like, I literally did not want to get out of jail. I didn't have nowhere to go. And then I was in jail several times due to little tickets or fighting or small charges. There was a lot of things, Holly, that I got away with. And that's when I say, like, the God of my understanding, Jesus, for me was really calling me. And I didn't know it then, but I was getting in jail for things, and I would not ever get charged for the things that I was actually going to jail for.
Hmm.
People really didn't know like my government name. Like I had this, I guess, rep in the street. Like, hey, like I was a one woman army. Like, I was ruthless, and I would go and handle things. And, I was one of them that just took care of what I need to. So all that to say, I was in multiple jails all around the city. And
And this was
but
still in Dallas, right?
yeah, it was all
Okay.
in Dallas. Yep, I was in jail in Irving, Arlington, Grand Prairie, Carrollton, all over the place, Mesquite,
Yeah.
like, yeah. And I was just kind of going to jail for like the stupidest things. And I had, well, a lot of warrants everywhere. I had like 16 warrants at one time, tickets and shit. And so they were like, I would go to jail for, the cops would come because I was at somebody's house kicking down the door with a sledgehammer, trying to fight them just because I got a call, and they said, oh, they said something about you. And again, a lot of that rage was starting to come up. And then the cops would show up, and then, I would go to jail, and no charges were ever pressed. Like, almost killed a girl because fought her, and no charges were ever pressed. Like, it was just a lot of that. Like, I'm telling you, I have flew over the radar and got away with a bunch of shit,
Wow.
in fiction. Yeah, there's a lot of stories that I have that I was just like really spiraling, and I didn't even know. I thought this was just normal shit. This is what we do. This was my normal. This was my norm. You know.
So what, so at what point did you like say I can't do this anymore? Like at what where did you hit your bottom, or like I know for me, like I was like physically, I was just like broken. I was like, I can't do this anymore. So where what did that look like for you when you
You
were?
know, I want to say the whole process was like that because I feel like there was always something more.
Yeah.
Like I said, there was always something like, this ain't it. And but I want to say I can't really pinpoint what it was. But I want to say it was a calling of God for me. I didn't know it then. And I want to say also my mom sat one time, and I remember I was doing something and saying something. I was sitting up there trying to I was doing something, and she looked at me, and she was like, Jay, some of the things that you say are really hurtful. Cause I was so like blah, just I was like, if I thought it, I said it, and I was a passive aggressive with it. I mean, I didn't know communication skills, I
Hmm.
didn't know. I didn't know. I was like, my motto was like, hey, I'm keeping it real. At least I'm keeping it real. Like, I'm keeping it 100. I was very yeah, emotionally immature. Like, I'm just keeping it raw, and the street code, right?
Yeah.
What if it hurt your feelings? That's your shit, not mine. Like, and I thought it was a badge of honor to keep it real, right? That was a thing back then, or whatever. And she said that, and I remember And then I remember like it kind of hit me. I don't know if I was under the influence or whatever, but it really hit me. And I was like, damn, like that's that's shitty. Like, because I was really raw, Holly, like towards my I only had grown-up friends. So I was always the youngest in my crowd. Always. Like I always had friends that were 20 years older than me, 30 years older than me, and 15 years. Like I always hung out, like I never hung around, people my age too much. And so I would like boss him around and be like, shut the fuck up and blah. Like I was just so raw. And I remember when she said that it started clicking in my head, and I remember hearing the same things and my friends like, dang, like you're mean, you're raw, like you're this. And I was like, damn, like I don't want to be that person. Like, and I remember having like that moment. I couldn't really articulate it, but I remember saying, I don't want to be like my dad. Because all my life, they always told me that I was going to be just like my dad and I wasn't ever going to amount to shit just because I was my dad's daughter. That was something that always stuck to me because that was something I never wanted to do. I always wanted to just be better than my parents. So that started complimenting already what the world was saying about me. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I got with my first girlfriend, I was showing those abusive tendencies. I was becoming abusive verbally, physically, all that. I was becoming my dad. I was doing drugs with my dad. I was selling drugs with my dad. Like I was that. And I remember having that moment. And like I said, I think I was under the influence and I was like, dang, like I'm doing this. So I think that was in that transitional moment. I remember hitting a pipe, and we're in the meth circle at one of the apartments that I had. Well, my ex girlfriend had got us because she was of age, and she got an apartment because I was living in a shack, and there was a bunch of shit between then and that. But I remember looking around the meth circle, and my dad was there. And I was like, what am I doing? And I remember I didn't really know, I didn't know Jesus then. And I remember praying to myself, and I said, and I was on meth, and I was like, man, God, if you're real, I want you to make me so sick off of this. And I said that to myself. And I remember putting the pipe up to my mouth and I started already gagging. And I still hit the pipe, of course. And I just threw up, right? That was a pivotal moment. And then I cared about my ex-girlfriend so much. She was getting really bad on the drugs. And so I was like, man, how am I supposed to tell her to get off the shit when I'm on it? Right. So I was just having a lot of inner dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
um, a lot of self-awareness. And I was just like, man, I want to get off this shit. So I started having this desire to get off the shit. Of course, I was in and out of the addiction, battling, trying to get her to get off of it, trying to set a tone with my dad and all that. And then I would, that's when I want to say, like, I started throwing myself into meetings. I didn't even know what the hell meetings were. So I couldn't find out today there were NA and AA meetings. I was just
Mm-hmm.
like showing up places. I started like signing up for all kinds of shit. I dropped out of school for like 2 years, moved to Virginia. Like I started really taking a lot of action, but I was still in my junk. I was just like operating and like signing up for shit, like just trying to guide myself. And then fast forward a little bit, that was still a desire. And then I started doing drugs again. I started doing ecstasy. I was at raves. And I remember one of my tattoo artists, he was like a Christian dude. And he was like, come to church. Every time I seen him, I was walking out the liquor store, doing a beer run, running, doing some shit. And he was like, hey, come here. And I was like, oh, what's up, man? And he was like, hey, come to church, He was like, come to church, come to church. And I was like, ah, okay, whatever. And I was just kind of brush him off. And every time I saw him, like I was always doing some shit. I remember sitting at a rave one day and I was like, I kept feeling this tug of God, like, go to church. And I started going to church. I remember being under the influence, being at a rave. The rave didn't stop until the whole 3 days later. Like I was on and I never came down. And I remember going to church and I was under the influence in church. Like I was like, how the hell did I end up here?
Mm-hmm.
I was snorting coke in the church. I was high, but I just kept feeling this tug to go. And I would like, dang, I'm in church. It was just a trip. And I want to say that was the moment where I found something greater. Well, God found me because he's always been there. He's never been lost. I was the one lost and he found me in my mess. And I remember the high wasn't the same. I would always be at the raves. I would always be under the influence. And it was so crazy, Holly, because I didn't even know Jesus like that. But I was preaching. I had my Bible open. I was snorting coke with the Bible. And every time I was hitting the blunt, talking about God and oh Jesus this, and it was just like this weird moment. And everybody was like, "Ah, oh, be quiet, you're fucking up my high." And I was just like, I can't stop, it won't stop. I was like, I don't know what's happening here. Like I was messing up everybody's high because my apartment my apartment became like the it house. It was the it house, and I was started selling drugs. I was very generous with them, and there I go, like breaking up ice, smoking coke, doing K2, and doing I mean just doing all kinds of shit. It's preaching and talking about Jesus. And you should have seen, they would look at me like, girl, shut up, like you. And I'm like, I can't. So
You're dealing and
girl,
saving them at the same time.
it was so funny. And then here's the deal too. I remember in that season, I would go to the strip clubs, I would sell, and I'd be talking about Jesus to the strippers. Hey, what do you want to do with your life? Like, I would be like, drinking, of course. And I'm like, so, there's goals out there. You can do better. And they were just like, I said, I ain't gonna give you no money or nothing, but we can talk about Jesus. And girl, I don't know what was going on. And it like, yeah, it was like it
Oh
was
my
so
God.
funny. Yeah, so I was in and out of my addiction, right? And I was still in it. And then I would go to the clubs, I would go to the bars talking about God. And I was just like, what the heck? So Jesus kept meeting me at the bar, at the dope house, in my addiction. He would not leave me alone. I didn't know then, but I think that was my moment where I just could not ignore the call anymore. And finally, of course, I after that, I remember a song came on and I felt the spirit and I dropped to my knees in church. And it was just a beautiful moment that I'll never forget, that you can't unknow what you know. You can't, like, there's no way you can like go back from that. But I
Yeah.
did. After that, I went home, I cleaned up my apartment. I said, everybody get the fuck out, blah, 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 get them all out, put on some worship music. I didn't even know that was worship music, but I was just had this thirst and this hunger. And I started just becoming a disciple for Jesus and all that. However, I still went back in and out because I recognize like I did not have the coping skills. I did not know how to cope. Every time I was used, it was because of a breakup. And that first girlfriend of mine it was very unhealthy. We had this extreme trauma bond. It was very, very just in and out. She was my first girlfriend, and I think I've only had like two girlfriends my whole life, and including my wife, now. And it was just, I did not know how to cope with emotions, and I was seeking the same people that my mom was seeking. So I was continued in that. So all that to say that I want to say in a nutshell, the God of my understanding kept messing with me. He would not leave me alone. He kept bothering me, and I was messing up everybody's high. And I guess that's what it was,
So,
Girl, it was, oof.
so, 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 since God kept, um, bullying you,
Yes, girl.
God kept bullying you.
Mhm.
What made you finally like give it up, like for good? Like,
I coping skills. I didn't know there was a name to it. So one day I started smoking crack. I didn't know I was smoking crack, but I started smoking crack, right? Oh my God. So I started smoking crack. I lived in California. And I remember I relapsed and I started smoking. There was a breakup that I went through for a situationship, right? I ended up being in a horrible domestic violence situationship. And I didn't know it was DV because, again, I didn't know, right? It was normal.
mhm.
Long story short, I was like spiraling again, and then I started missing the trauma bond of my ex, and then I ended up relapsing off meth and coke, and then I started smoking crack. I remember sitting there on my couch with these strangers. I have no idea who they were. And how did I get crack? But I was getting crack and I bought a lot of it. Um, and I remember sitting there and I said, what is this? Like, why? What is it that I keep going back? Like, what is it? Right. So I remember thinking, I was like, oh my God, like it's every time I'm going through a breakup. Like, it's the weirdest thing. I started connecting the dots and I was high. And I was like, damn, it's every time I go through a breakup. So I remember those meetings and I started researching, and then I went to a Lambda meeting, and they were talking about cocaine anonymous. They were talking about they kept saying this word codependency. And I was like, what the hell is codependency? And then they started talking about SLAA, SLAW, Sex, Love, Addiction Anonymous. And then they started talking about these terms. So one day I went home and I was like, what is this? And I researched codependency. I was like, oh my God, like it just, and then I researched SLAW and I was like, oh my God, because SLAW is very broad. It's not like you don't have to have sex, love, addiction. It's, I'm actually quite the opposite. I was a love avoidant, and the codependency. I was also into the fantasy, and because my codependency, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I started researching these things and I was like, whoa, it was almost like the bottom of my world fell out. And I was like, whoa, I went down this rabbit hole and I was like, whoa. And then I ended up getting into NAMI because I was trying to figure out what was this girl's problem. I didn't know like she had like severe mental health, and I got into NAMI. Like I said, I just got curious and I just started signing myself up for shit again. So I
Mm-hmm.
went through NAMI. I started learning about mental health, and because I was like, again, the codependent me wanted to save her, right? And be like, oh, I can fix her and she just needs help. And again, I was doing what I did with mommy, right? Be the codependent, the savior, and abusive and all that. Um, and so I started researching, all that to say I went down a rabbit hole and I found answers. And I'm still like finding answers, but I think I started connecting some dots and I started understanding that I did not, first started acknowledging that, oh shit, I'm in an abusive relationship. Like, whoa, because she was beating the shit out of me. She was hitting me. She was jumping out the damn car on the 605 in California and the, 405. Like, it was just I was like, oh, I can save you. Like, it was the
Yeah.
wildest things. So
Sounds like a lot of drama and chaos too, which
yes, it was a lot, but it was my familiar.
yeah,
My
yeah,
brain
yeah,
was like,
yeah,
oh wow, like this is normal, right? And I
yeah,
gotta fix her. It's okay. People have given up on her, and now I see why. But you know what I'm saying? So all that to say is my research, my openness, and my curiosity to find like after I discovered that it was due to breakups, I was like, okay, breakups. That's the reason why I relapsed each and every time. And I'm using and spiraling. And when I relapse hard. I will buy in bulk. I never came down, and I was more of like a big time binger. And then I'll stop for years and years and years, and then I'll go back again, and it was like emotional stuff, and so I threw myself back into therapy because I've been in therapy since I was old enough to sign myself up. And I didn't really understand it then. And that's when I was trying to address that anger part when my mom said that. I was like, oh, I need to get in therapy. Like I said, I was just signing myself up for shit.
mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, so I think all that to say was research and then recognizing that there was a name to this shit. And so once I found out that there was a name to this behavior, then I was able to start addressing it, which is something that I and like still working on so hard is the
Yeah,
codependent. Mhm.
yeah.
And then
So
that's what really when I found out about narcissism, oh, that was another situationship because I ended up in a narcissistic, abusive, emotional abusive, toxic relationship. Then that's when I discovered about my mother, and so it was just like this. It just continued. God just kept revealing things to me. I felt.
hmm but that's when you pretty much got sober, when you put everything down.
Consistently, yes. I
Yes.
want to say, and that's when I ended up getting into, because I'm a truck driver as well. So, and I would do a lot of drugs in every state. Like I did a lot of drugs over the road, a lot. I had a plug in every state, literally. And that's when my knee got really, I had that clutch knee and bad back and shit from driving all these years. And then that's when I got into the field, and again I was seeking knowledge and stuff, and that's when I got into that's when purpose found me. That's when I recognized I didn't have purpose. Because remember, to rewind a little bit, I said there was always something. I knew I was always meant for something more. That's what I was striving for, and I kept signing myself up for shit. I didn't know I had a fire in me. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't see it, but I just knew I was headed there. I just didn't know. And I
Hmm.
and then, like I said, I had a relationship with my Jesus, and I started developing that, and purpose found me. And then I had an amazing Christian Pentecostal boss. She was just so amazing, and she really led me into this field. And actually, that toxic, abusive girl signed me up for this orientation, and I orientation at this college, and I went, and it ended up being substance use counseling, and I didn't know it. And so it was just this God, this my story is just so, like, all the details in it. Of course, we can't get too into it, right? But it was just how I could not ignore the calling over my life, and purpose found me. And when I got into this, I was like, whoa, because I remember trying to get into college. I was wanted to be a psychologist or a sociologist or whatever, and they told me that I needed to think more realistic about my goals. Remember, because the Marines shut me down,
Yeah.
this shut me down, and I recognize now that God didn't want me to be that kind of therapist or whatever. He wanted me to be a substance use counselor, and that's where I am now. And when I got into that, I was like, whoa, this is it. Like I found this life in me, and now everything orbited. I was like, this is why. Because I remember wanting to take my life. I remember sitting there because I've been kicked out of the churches so many times, and there was just a bunch of shit, and I was like, I hate this, I don't want to live no more. And I remember the God of my understanding saying, hey, no. And I remember saying, fine, I'm going to live this life, and all this shit better not be for nothing. I was yelling and screaming and cussing at God. This better not be for nothing. And now everything that I've been through, literally, I get paid for it. The DV, the mental health, the substance use, the reentry, the youth, everything, and everything orbited. So calling, purpose, here I am.
Yep. And it's, I mean, it's amazing how the stuff that you go through um, can be a turning point, and then an inspiration for somebody else. And you don't know how all that stuff that you go through can help somebody else. You know that, and then when you do share that stuff, it takes the power away from all that stuff. Because you realize you really aren't alone in all of that stuff, because it's isolating when you actually are in that stuff
Yeah,
without.
my whole life has been isolated. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been unhoused. I've been, unhoused a lot. I've lived in the car. I've lived in the street. I've lived in dope houses. And I recognize, all this. I want to say that I did this all by myself. I didn't know it was God then, but I have carved away, and that's why I say there's no excuses. If you want something, and you truly desire to be something more, and not be like your parents, and not be like your caregivers, and break the chains and break the cycles, you're not going to stop. Because honestly, look, I'm tattooed, I'm pierced up, I've been rejected so much, Holly. I have been casted out, I have been overlooked, I have been dismissed. I was kicked out of two districts. I fought for my diploma. They did not want to give me not my diploma. There was so much shit that I went through to get my diploma. I ended up on a newspaper. I ended up advocating. I ended up doing all kinds of things, and I did not give up. And I never had anybody there speaking up for me. And I had to learn early on to have a voice and fight fight early on. I fought for that diploma. I fought, for this where I'm at today. I fought tooth and nail for the employment that I had. I made a way, and I refuse to give up in all that mess.
Yeah, that's what I'm finding out too today is, you know what, I do have a voice, and also um, and I think, and you and I had talked about this prior to the this podcast, but I'm finding out that you know I'm having to have a voice by having healthy boundaries, because I never had healthy boundaries. Like, I thought that I was being kind by people pleasing or whatever it was. But in reality, with narcissistic abuse, that's not being kind. That's
Mm.
a completely different story. Um, that's different, you
That's a
know.
whole nother podcast.
That's a whole that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
So, but yeah, so and you do have, in some respects, with that, you have to take care of yourself. That's completely different. Um, so because that right there is also cunning, baffling, powerful. Because if you don't recognize the signs, then if it'll be too late before you know it. Um, so, but anyway, so I'm glad that you found your purpose, because if you hadn't, then we wouldn't be here today. And I'm very grateful for that. And I'm glad God beat the shit out of you. Glad God
Yeah.
beat the shit out of you so that you can be here. Um, so so I guess we'll end here today, and then we'll move on to episode 2, and then we'll talk about recovery, and you know uh, move on to your recovery, and where you are with that, and talk a little bit about peer support, and different kinds of peer support, because there's recovery peer support, there's mental health peer support, there's um, peer support for incarceration, and families and all that kind of stuff. So we'll talk about that, and maybe a little bit of narcissistic abuse and domestic violence, and that type of thing. So, and then we'll have the third episode, where we'll talk about um, trying to break down the stigma of alcoholism and addiction and mental health, because I think a lot of that needs to be, in my opinion, you may have a different opinion, but I think the more we talk about that kind of stuff and put it out in the open, it takes the fear away from that type of stuff. Now, there's certain cases where maybe that it's a different type of thing, but I think the more we talk about mental health and alcoholism and addiction and all of that stuff, I think the less of an issue it is. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Do
I
you
feel
agree?
like we should normalize it.
Yeah, me
Make it
too.
normal. Yeah, make it cool.
Yeah, me too. Because I think people I don't know why it's like taboo, but I think and especially in like the workplace, because I don't think there's anybody out there that doesn't know somebody or have a family member that has an addiction or alcoholism problem. And me personally, I don't think there's anybody on this planet that hasn't experienced a mental health issue. That's just me.
I
Because
agree too.
we all go through stuff. We all go through grief, uh, depression. We're all sad, all that stuff. So I just think we should normalize it.
Yeah, and here's the deal, a lot of people don't know it has a name and culture, right? There's culture, and like I said, I can get all into this. This is right up my alley because I'm literally the only one on both sides of my family that's addressing this elephant in a room, you know?
Yeah.
So and I wear it with a badge of honor, and but I can't wait to talk about it. Yes, ma'am. I agree. I
And
agree.
another thing that we didn't talk about today too is you and I also have chronic illness that we deal with, and a lot of I don't know about you, so but for me, a lot of times people and the chronic illness that you and I deal with, it's considered an invisible illness. So people look at us a certain way and are like, "You're not sick," which okay, fine, but don't tell me I'm not in pain, and don't tell me, like so. There's some things that are a little dicey when you deal with things like that, um, that we should talk about too, I think. So
I agree with that. I was just having that conversation with my therapist before I got on. Is I'm literally flared up right now. I'm flared up right now. I'm having a fiber flare up right now.
yeah. So and I mean and I mean we do the best that we can, and it, uh, and sometimes like you're doing this right now, and I didn't know that. And so, but I know what it feels like,
Yeah.
you know. So anyway, with that, I think we'll end to give you a break. To give you a break because I do know how it feels. I do know how it feels. But anyway, thanks, Jay, for doing this for me, and doing our first episode, because I really appreciate it, and I'm glad. I'm very grateful. So we'll move on to second episode and talk about recovery and all that good stuff. And I hope you have a good evening, and wish our viewers a good evening or morning or whenever you're watching this. And we shall see you guys later. So take care.